Hey everybody, this is Beau York, and I just stepped into the Vactor-Verse.
Hey, this is Bell, and I just stepped into the Vactor-Verse.
I am Vactor, and this is the Vactor-Verse. Today on the show, I have two very special guests, Beau and Beall from TV Talk, the #1 podcast for your favorite TV and streaming shows, as well as the home of World of Craft, Batcraft, and Flashcraft. They hosted the #1 rated Flash podcast for 7 years running, and they had the most unnecessary show on the internet. Beau and Beall, welcome to the Vactor-Verse, my friends.
Thank
Oh
you.
man,
Thank you very much.
so
Great
glad to be here.
I cannot say how thrilled I am to have you both. You two are industry veterans of this geeky podcasting game. We have a long history that goes back, but we'll get into that on the show proper. I just want to let everybody know all the show links are going to be down below for these two lovely boys. I think you should follow them. They're doing some great stuff, and they got some great stuff coming up in the future. I was privy to, but I won't say on the show right now, but they have some great stuff. So follow them for some fantastic content coming down the line. But let's get right into it, boys. I wanted to get, because I don't think I ever asked you, like I said, our relationship goes back quite a ways, but I don't think I've ever asked you two your comic book origin stories. And this could be whether it's a single issue, an animated series, a toy line. What can you remember is your core memory that got you into comics? I want to start with Beall first. Beall, what got you into comics?
So, it's actually my brother-in-law.
Ooh.
This was, oh gosh, I'm almost embarrassed to say how many years ago it was. It was a long time ago. It was a long time ago.
No shame.
Yeah, I believe she was still in high school. So my sister's 10 years older than I am. So I must have been like 7 or 8, something like
Mm.
that. And he wasn't my brother-in-law at the time. Obviously, he was dating my sister, but my brother-in-law now. And he was big into comics. He was also a
Ah.
big artist, and one of my inspirations to kind of like draw in that comic book style. Because I really love the work that he did. Like his parents had hung it all around the house, and it was just beautiful stuff. And I think we were over there one day because he used to live on the reservoir, which is big body of water in Jackson, Mississippi. And I think we were swimming out there or something like that. And he wanted to show me his comic book collection, and he had a massive comic book collection. And the first comic that he gave me was Wolverine #2. I think it was volume. I don't remember which volume it was from. I was going to pull it out of my of my my box of comics that are like sitting right over here, but I didn't think about it in time. But it was the one with the Silver Samurai on the cover. Wolverine #2, I believe it was volume 2. It wasn't like the second Wolverine comic ever to come out. It was one of the other volumes or whatnot. But that was it. Like I read that and I was like, this Wolverine guy, like this is legit. This is awesome. And I was like, what else you got? And
Nice.
so yeah, he gave me a bunch of older comics, like some Batman comics. So I got a collection of DC, Marvel, and then a couple like smaller sort of indie publishers. Ultraverse was one of them. They did like Hardcase and Prime. And then there were some other like Wildcats, which I think
Ooh.
was Image or Dark Horse. And then but the Ultraverse ones, because I was like #1, like #1 issue, like that's super cool, right? And so I started collecting like a couple of those like Ultraverse comics, like Prime and
Mm.
Hardcase, and a couple different ones like that, just from the stuff that he was showing me, because he had some like older comics, like some older like special edition comics that are like in the boards and stuff. Like it's like, I want to do that, I want to collect comics. And of course everybody in the 90s wanted to collect comics, because that was around the time where you had the death of Superman, and like everyone's like, these are things are going to be worth millions of dollars in 20 years. And so of course they published 57 million issues, and so they're all worthless, right? But you know what,
Right.
they're special and important, and they mean a lot to me, and that's really all that matters in the end. I did not become a millionaire off of any of my early comics that I had, but I still have them. They're right here, and I'm looking at them right now, and so each one contains a memory. And I would say that is like that was my first kind of dive into it. And it was my brother-in-law, Alvin, if you're listening. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. You kind of got me down this nerdy road.
Nice, Alvin. Thank you. On behalf of all comic book fans, thank you very much for starting a new obsession, starting a new comic fan down the line, Mister Beau York. What was your comic book origin story?
Man, okay, I'm gonna tell you my comic book origin story, but I want to also tell you my Vactor origin story. Yeah, that's right. I need to like share the Vactor origin story. I'll tell you the comic book stuff in a second, but like Vactor, you are one of my favorite podcasters. And there's a reason for that. There's a lot of reasons for that. You're very talented. You've got like the skill. You've been at it for a long time, far longer than me. But like you are, and I think this is true, you were the first ever person I witnessed podcast like in public, like in a public setting, which at the time was not a thing that happened. But back in the day, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the podcast was called Geekland, right?
Yes.
Back in Memphis when you were living there, you lived there, I lived there. You did not know me at all. And I remember I used to listen to your podcast at Geekland when I was living in Memphis, and I heard y'all talk about where y'all would sometimes podcast at the local comic shop. And I thought, that's the comic shop that I go to. And lo and behold, one day I go in after work to pick up some comics, and y'all are all gathered around. You've got your mics stacked on top of the long boxes, and y'all are actually podcasting right there at the comic shop. And I remember the first time I saw you, and I was like, that dude does not look like that voice. Like something every single podcaster can relate to. I'm like, that's just the truth.
I've been told that like, many times.
That's Vactor? Okay.
That was a great time in my life. That was Comics and Collectibles in Memphis, Tennessee. That was a fantastic time. And I met a lot of friends who I still have to this day just by doing that podcast. So very grateful to that time in my life. And little did I know, a stealth Beau was there witnessing it all happen. It's kind of like Beau is like the reverse Vactor. He came from the future and he went back to the comic shop and he witnessed it.
That's right. Except I want to be like the reversal. So like not every bad thing that's happened to you, Vactor, but every good thing that's ever happened to you.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I like that. I like that a lot. That's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Man. Well, yeah, that's a great memory.
Yeah, man. I had to share that. I was thinking about that earlier. And I think that's great because I had no idea that we'd be connected later on once I started kind of podcasting and we'd be in the same groups and everything. I think it's awesome. But man, okay, comic book origin story. I was trying to think about this. I believe so. Like, there's the first time I got comics, and then there's when I got into comics, and like for me, comics has been kind of like there'll be kind of like a burst and then I'm out for a while. And then there'll be a burst and then I'm out for a while. I think a lot of people can probably relate with that.
Yes, right.
And, but I remember very specifically the first comic books I ever got was when I was little, our parents would send us to summer camp. And while we were at summer camp, my grandmother would actually send us a couple of things. She sent us candy, which immediately got confiscated because you weren't allowed to have candy at the camp. She would send us fake love notes so that we could brag to other campers that we had like a secret admirer, which was awesome until we figured out it was our grandmother. It's so embarrassing.
That's brutal.
But,
that's
she would literally she'd like classic stuff. She would spray it with perfume and put like the lipstick all over it, and like she went all out. Okay, she was very creative. And I remember because everybody was like, "Who is it?" And I was like, "It's this girl from the girls' camp. It's got to be her." Because like everybody had a crush on her, but I kind of knew her, and I thought this is what this is. Until I found out that my brother got the exact same letter, and that's when we kind of pieced it together. But anyway, along with this contraband and all other stuff she would send us, she would also send us comic books. And so she sent typically it was like I think it was like 2 or 3 Spider-Man comics, not connected at all. Like it was like whatever was running at the time, and it was very sporadic. So there were a couple of standalones, which I was very grateful for because I got the entire story. But then there would be like pieces of the story, and then she wouldn't know to send the rest of it, And so we would get like a little taste from that standpoint.
Man.
And I think that's the first time I ever had comics that I owned. But what really got me into it, that probably kind of like primed the interest in terms of like Spider-Man in particular. Because man, oh man, that 90s Spider-Man show, with X-Men, the Uncanny X-Men show as well. That's what really drew me in and got me connected to the character of Peter Parker. And then as I kind of dove deeper into the character, obviously that's an older version from the one that was really kind of known in the comic books at the time. But I really felt like this kinship with this young man trying to make it work and everything kind of like not quite working. And like, and it's like, and despite all of that, he had this like fierce commitment to like justice and doing the right thing and not getting any credit for it whatsoever. And that was something that I was very like, I latched onto and like really kind of even now to my core, really hold fast to as being somebody, even in this fictional character, that I very much looked up to as a young man. And I remember, okay, so there was the cartoons, and then after the cartoons, I kind of stepped away for a while. And I want to say Civil War came before Dark Reign, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think when Civil War started coming, that got my attention. And at the time, I really didn't know Captain America or Iron Man. That was really my first introduction to those characters. And I remember a friend of mine, he was an older classman in high school, if I'm remembering correctly, started like reading Civil War. He was letting me borrow his comics. And I was just really just engrossed in this beautiful, I mean, the artwork was nothing like anything I'd ever seen before in comics. And it immediately just had this cinematic feel where the punches were just real and like the sparks flew off the page. And then on top of that, the story was just so like mind boggling. It was great. It was phenomenal. And it pulled me back in for a long time. And then once that kind of came to its conclusion, I stepped back for a while until, gosh, I think, Beau, when you and I were in college, you and I started kind of hitting up the comic shop. And that's when I picked up Outsiders for the first time. I was really excited about that concept of, I think I was listening to maybe some, it wasn't podcast back then, it was like iRadio. And I think Comic Geek Speak or somebody was kind of mentioning this, where that Nightwing was kind of following in Batman's footsteps by like creating this kind of counter Justice League task force and called Outsiders. And I thought that was such a cool concept. So I picked it up and I decided, you know what? I'm not going to be this like hardcore collector that's going to get everything. I'm just going to stick to this one storyline. And so that's what I did. I kept pretty hardcore on that until the Teen Titans had kind of a crossover event. And then I'm like, well, shoot, now I got to go back and get all these Teen Titans, And then I started seeing what was happening. I was like, all right, let me back off this because I don't just have money to be able to throw at collecting all these comic books. And so I stepped away from it again for a while. I remember at that time, if I'm not mistaken, the Batman and World's Finest Volume 3, I think, was out. Because I remember, Beau, you were reading that and collecting that.
Yeah.
And Belle and I, in college, we would get comic books, and then we would go hit up the bowling alley and play the Uncanny X-Men arcade game with like, a bag full of quarters. And this is what we did in college, ladies.
I mean, it was astounding. Like, it was crazy. Like all the bowling alley ladies, they loved my hair when I had hair.
Yeah.
And they were all like, 64 and up. But hey, they loved us.
I was turning heads when I was choosing Nightwing. They were like, or not Nightwing. When I was going Nightcrawler, I was turning heads because they were like, oh, you're going Nightcrawler. He can wipe out the entire board with one click. It's a bold choice.
That was my favorite character in that game. Man, that is fantastic.
Wolverine all the way, 100% Wolverine.
I also liked.
Yeah.
I liked all the characters.
My origin story, man. I got out of it again after college, and then I picked it back up because I was walking in the Kroger or whatever the grocery store was that's no longer there in Memphis. And I remember I was walking by and I saw Dark Reign, and like the cover immediately grabbed my attention. I picked it up. I saw this concept yet again. It was just thinking outside the box of the villains taking over as the Avengers, when I was just blown away by the concept. So I collected all of Dark Reign all the way up to the end of Siege and loved that. One of the best comic book read-throughs I've had when I was actively reading and picking up on a week, or I guess then a monthly basis. So yeah, there's some other stuff that's kind of intermingled throughout. You got those wonderful graphic novels you pick up. Watchmen completely changes the game and your mindset. I remember Kingdom Come was another one of those that was a very okay, comics aren't just for kids. Like this is something, intense and can be really just next level storytelling. And so, yeah, that amalgam is my comic book origin story.
That is perfect. What's crazy, both you two, the entire time I've known you, I've associated you with DC, and whether it was Arrow, Batman, Flash, and to hear your origin stories be so Marvel heavy, that's kind of crazy to me.
Don't tell anybody, but yeah, like
I know. Like, Vactor, you trying to like out us? What's going on, man?
Yeah.
Man, that's crazy.
I've always been I won't say like a Marvel fanboy, but like that was my introduction, was Marvel. And you know, the 97 X-Men cartoon, the Spider-Man cartoon, Beau, that you mentioned earlier, and those kinds of things. And like, you know, most of my DC comics came from my brother-in-law. So like I was reading Batman and like, you know, some Superman here and there and like some things like that, but I was just so drawn into X-Men. It was probably because of the TV media. That like that I love that Spider-Man show. You know, I loved X-Men, the 90s show there. And yeah, the video game, of course, like you mentioned, Beau. And it was really like I didn't start collecting DC until I think it was World's Finest, back like in college. Really, like that's when I started picking up. I was getting into the Superman and Batman, and it was just, I was like, this is I love the art. Because I think at that point I was interested in that because it was just started. The art was good, and I was kind of like following artists at that point, where I was like, I like the art style of this guy, I like the art style of that guy, and I was buying graphic novels here and there because, you know, those are the some of the ones that I hadn't read, where it was like, you have to read this or you're not a comic book fan kind of situations,
right,
you know?
Right.
And so I was sort of like, I wasn't collecting, because I used to pull like, I don't know, 6-7 different titles. Like I'd go to Dragon's Lair, which is a comic shop here in Austin, and have like a stack of comics like this big. And it was like, I can't afford this. I am, you know, so, you know, I kind of stepped back, like Beau was mentioning, you know, and then when I'd come back, I'd see, oh, there's an artist doing a run on the Hulk. And so like the Red Hulk saga, like that's where I got into Hulk there, because I wanted to follow that artist. And like Frank Quietly, who did not Red Sun, All-Star Superman. Yeah. I would, you know, he would do a run on something, I'd be like, yeah, I'll pick up that run. And so I was kind of like, you know, piecing stuff together here and there, but really like I've always kind of just been drawn to Marvel. And another sort of like break into the DC universe was with a game called HeroClix. I don't know if you ever heard of it or played it.
Right, you were big into that, man.
I loved this game. I love tabletop games. That's another big thing that's like a part of me. And
nice.
HeroClix was one where they're like, you know, blind boxes. They're little pre-painted miniature figures, and it's such a simple, fun rule set that just really sort of exhibits the powers of these characters. And so I got real heavy into HeroClix, and there was a Flash set that was coming out, and this was like right around the time the Flash TV show was coming out. And so I was like, yes. And I had a better job at this point, so I could afford it. But there was the Flash set. They did a Darkest Night set. They did like all, like I honestly have way more DC HeroClix than I do Marvel HeroClix, which is kind of surprising to me. But like I through like osmosis of those HeroClix, because each little card that details the abilities also has kind of like the comics, where, you know, this character's from. And so it was really neat, because I could go and I could look and see, oh, you know what, this is a really neat character, I'm gonna, you know, pick up this one issue and kind of look through it and all, you know, stuff like that. And so yeah, definitely started out like way heavy Marvel, and then as I sort of got older and got exposed to more like graphic novel sort of things too, to really sort of get into that feel of those DC characters. And then the HeroClix game is when I really started to like I balance it. Everything must be in balance, right? And so I was very heavy Marvel, and then you know, I went real heavy DC, and so now I'm more balanced in the middle. And so like, yeah, I still like to follow artists every now and again, but I've been getting more stuff on digital.
Yes.
Which was a thing that I never thought that I would do, because I love buying and bagging, you know, buying a comic, flipping through the pages, bagging it, and then putting it in my box, and then it's there in the box, it's safe, and I'll never touch it again. But you know, I there was, I think the Vision run that came out several years ago, where Vision,
where we had a family.
Yeah.
That's good.
And it was incredible. And I was about to go on a trip, and I wanted to read it, and I think like most of the issues were out on digital at that point, and I was like, I'm just screwed, I'm just gonna buy some digital comics. I'm gonna jump into those waters. And I was like, why had I not done this before? And so, so that's kind of how I do things nowadays. As technology improves, I think it's, our responsibility to sort of like jump in the boat and go with it. And it's, I don't think print comics will ever die, because I still think there's a market there. Like I'm fond of print comics and stuff, but like as for a convenience factor where it's like, I'm about to go on this trip, I want to read some comics. This is a new Vision run that I've heard is really, really good, so I'm going to pick it up. Like, I think that's really, really neat. So, but yeah, it's kind of interesting how very, very Marvel to begin with, but now here we are, doing a podcast for 10 years about the Flash.
Man, that is
I know, but this is good though, Vactor. You're good to call us out on this. I think this is important because the reality, like, let's lean in here, right? Yeah. While Beall has been like, his comic book knowledge far like exceeds mine. My knowledge of more of like the additional media, from things like Smallville to like the Bruce Timm-verse, like those types of things were really my big influence, especially in the DC department. So whereas more of my comic books really kind of are more in the Marvel, in terms of like where I was engaging with DC was in television and was in movies and was in the cartoons, which of course is obviously television. And I mean, let's just be real. Over the last 10 years, it's been a little rough out here in these DC streets. Okay. But which is crazy when you think about it, because Bruce Timm essentially created the model for a cinematic universe, for a connected universe that Marvel picked up and created the MCU with the Bruce Timm DC animated playbook. You know what I mean? And then DC for the last 10 years hadn't been able to figure it out, which is crazy because it's like it's your playbook. And so it's been an interesting time. And with the Flash, even that has been such a roller coaster, because starting out, we're talking about one of the best television series that was hitting the airwaves in those early seasons. And you cannot say that about the latter seasons. That's just a fact.
Yeah, man, it's if you would have told me, like, from that time of comics and collectibles recording at that time to now, fast forward to 2023, the MCU has come, this, like you said, the rough DC waters, and then now the James Gunn DC that we're going to be getting. It's like so many things have changed. And Beall, what you were saying about digital, like, that's completely different. The landscape is completely different now. So it's two things. It's fascinating for me to hear both of your origin stories, because I always love hearing how did people get into comics, because it's not like something that you just, oh, I'm born as, okay, I'm gonna have comic books. Somebody has to introduce you to it. You have to have, through osmosis, something has to be put in front of you in order to become a fan of these properties. So I always like the similarities between my origin story and my guest, and then the differences. So I love hearing both of you guys in that aspect and regard. And then it just makes me fascinated to think of where comics were and how far they've come, and then where they're going in the future, because I'm that same way too, Beall, where I wasn't a digital person, but then I think with pretty much everything, with movies, with music, everything, it's just more convenient. And I don't have to have, storage space of long boxes and things like that for the comics. Also, being able to get them as soon as they release, instead of having to go to the comic book shop, even though, I love the comic book shop. I want people to support their local comic store, but even with video games, like, a midnight release will be 9 p.m. on the West Coast, and I could have the game preloaded, and I could be playing at 9 p.m. versus having to go out and get the game or wait for it to come in the mail. So digital, I think, is definitely the way that it seems like the market is going to be going. But I'm with you as well. I think the physical is never necessarily going to go away, but it's just going to kind of shift and evolve.
Yeah. Well, and you think about right now too, this is, I didn't even know this until I guess during the pandemic figured this out, because our local library here in Houston started offering up digital, like being able to check out books digitally, so you could download and do the books. And the same was true of graphic novels at the library. So I was actually, you mentioned the Vision book. I actually read that over during the pandemic,
Yes.
downloading directly for free on my library app. Now, it wasn't as convenient as some of the other apps that are out there to like, zoom in appropriately and have it all cut and nice and everything.
Right.
But I mean, you can make it work. But yeah, no, it's a digital era for sure.
But Vactor, I like what you were saying there about like, video game launch parties and stuff. I've been to so many video game launch parties. I remember the Wrath of the Lich King World of Warcraft launch party that they had here in Austin, Texas. And it was insane. It was absolutely crazy. And then like, waiting in line for like Halo games and stuff like that. And like for comic drops and stuff, like it was so weird how that just does not happen anymore.
Right.
And it kind of makes me sad. Like it kind of makes me sad. But on the same hand, like it's nice because, these things are kind of more accessible. And I'm all about making the things I love more accessible to more people. I think that's a great thing. And it does it. And yes, you're absolutely right. You have to support your friendly neighborhood comic shop. It's because that's where the community is now, right? Like going to the game store to buy the video game and like talk to people in line as you're waiting in the cold or whatever for like 3 hours for it to be midnight. Those kinds of things don't happen, but like there's still people at the comic shop who you can talk to and you can learn from and hear about different artists or different storylines or different things like that. So like that community is still there, and that's what I love about it. And that's why I don't think physical comics will ever go away, is because of that community. And
I will say I do think that comic book shops need to be better at adapting to the modern like era. Because like one of the things I've been trying to find, because my kids, they love comics. My daughter, and I've got 2 daughters, young girls, and they learn to read over comics. My oldest was super into Dogman, and like she was like picking up all these different comics for kids. And she actually just finished Harry Potter. These like she can read circles around me at this point. And I was thinking like, man, I'm like I would love to take her and kind of introduce her to some more comics, but I go to the comic book shops, and the vibe of the comic book shop, the person they're trying to market it to, is not my daughter. You know what I mean? Like it's not a space that is like intended and crafted for, with her in mind. And so I do, as it's kind of disappointing that as we see the market has evolved to become, to enter into this digital age, I agree with you. I think that the physical copies will never fully go away. I think that the industry and the market changes from that standpoint. It becomes more boutique and more collector, and the consumer looks a little bit different from that standpoint. But as you do have a new generation stepping into a modern world looking for comics, the comic book shop can't still be that like seedy basement-esque vibe that you find in a lot of comic book shops. Not all of them, not saying all of them, but it's bizarre to me that the comic book shop that I can walk into today looks exactly like in Houston, Texas, looks exactly like the one I walked into in the 90s in Jackson, Mississippi. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
we got a problem when the rest of the world is going digital and adapting, and there's not innovation that's happening in this space,
Let me plug a comic book shop for you right quick.
Do it.
Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasies is the comic book shop that became my home when I moved to Austin. And it used to be run out of a small house in Austin, Texas, and then they got like bigger locations, and now they finally like franchised, and there is one in Houston. So you should check it out.
Hang on. You should have started with that. What's it called again?
It's called Dragon's Lair Comics and Fantasy. They have locations in Austin, obviously, Columbus, Ohio, Houston, San Antonio. There's 2 in San Antonio. Yeah. And it's a great store. It is very inclusive. It's very friendly. That is their shtick. They want, when you go in there, they want you to feel welcome and at home. And so I think they do a really, really good job with that. And they have great selection of all sorts of stuff. They also do tabletop gaming, which is why I go there as well. But I, you're right though. There are a lot of comic shops that kind of haven't bridged the gap from the 90s to today. And if physical media and physical comic books are to survive, you're right. They need to adapt. And I think this is the roadmap for a lot of comic book stores in the future, is to be a welcoming place for everybody. And I think they do a really, really good job of that. So I'll plug Dragon's Lair if that's okay.
Nice. That's great, man. I love that. I was actually born in Austin, and my parents live in San Antonio now. So actually I'm going to be seeing them in August. So maybe I'll take a look. That sounds like a great comic shop. And it is also kind of sad because I did an episode of Geekland about this topic, about comic shops not being inviting for females in general, not necessarily younger females, but just females in general. And it felt like a boys' club. It felt like the comic book guy from The Simpsons. That was the major vibe that was given off. And that was like, what, 07, 08, 2007, 2008.
I remember that episode, Vactor. I'm telling you, I listened to your show back in the day.
Man, I wish those episodes did not disappear. I wish they were not erased from existence, because I was actually very proud of that episode. But that was, I felt hopeful at the end of that episode. Now I'm 2023 looking back, like, man, there hasn't been a lot of change in this era. But yeah, hopefully we can get more immersive. And that's not saying every single comic shop is like that.
Oh, of course not,
there's like Beau was saying, there's specifically ones that just depends, I think, on the ownership, and then kind of how it's shaped. We have one here that it used to be called Atomic Comics, and they were the chain comic shop. They went bankrupt for a number of years, came back, and then just recently had to change their name. And I'm blanking on the new name that they go by now, but that was always a comic shop that I felt not safe in. I felt like it was an inviting place to come. So they're out there. You just got to find them. You got to find the good owners out there. Let's talk, boys, about your kind of podcast history. And I don't know if you want to talk about what the future has to hold, Beau, but how did you guys get together and start what is Podastery and the TV Talk franchise? How did that come to be?
Well, we were walking on the beach one night, and I mean, I don't want to brag or anything, but it was perfect weather, holding hands, walking down the beach, and I was like, "This is it. This is the moment." I pretended to drop something back there. I know that's a little cheesy, but I got down on one knee and I looked up at him and I said, "Beau, would you do a podcast with me?"
Whoa!
And all of our friends were there. It was magic, which was weird because we didn't plan that.
It was beautiful.
That's lovely. That's fantastic.
Oh man. Okay, so great question. I think so. I had known that I wanted to do something in podcasting for a while. And like I'd seen what you guys had done. I'd seen what other folks kind of in, especially like your fraternity, that like era of podcasting, which was right after the term was really starting to circulate, like right after basically iRadio transitioned into podcasting, and even the debate of like what is a podcast that was in the early stages there. I was an early adopter from a listening standpoint. And I really saw that a lot of what we were trying to do in kind of marketing, just broadly, was being accomplished naturally in podcasting without even really trying. And which, like, just building relationship, building trust, all of these things that like companies were trying to do with their various campaigns was just something that would happen naturally by just being genuine and entering into a very intimate way of communication, which is just audio. When you remove literally everything else and it's just the voice, you can't add all these presuppositions about this individual. You're just connecting with them through this voice about something you care about deeply, because otherwise you wouldn't be listening. You had to make a choice in order to listen to it back then. And so, and which is still the case today. And so I really felt like there was a massive opportunity. I wanted to start what wasn't really a thing at that time, which was a podcast company. And so I remember early on, I was like, okay, I got to figure this thing out. We got to figure out how to do this. And Beall and I, oh man, do you remember how we like tried to podcast like 4 years before we actually did our first podcast?
Yes. I'm trying to remember what, because you had done like an audition for a for a podcast, like serial podcast. And you were telling me about
I had a small role as a reoccurring character on a show called Geek by Night.
Geek by Night,
which was done by Scott Corelli, and I was the Whitney Foreman character, for those that are going to get that reference. Essentially, I was the boyfriend that was fated to get in the way of the hero, right, until like the end of the season when they kill me off, so that the hero and the lady can go off and have wonderful adventures together. And so, but I got the bug after that, and I was really like, I want to do something like this.
Well, yeah, you told
and
me.
Yeah,
about
but do you
that.
remember what we even talked about?
I don't. Like, I remember Geek by Night. I remember you telling me telling me about that, and I listened to your episodes on there, and I was like, that sounds like a lot of fun. Like that, we should do something like that. And I have no idea what we did.
Yeah, I'm sure it was comic book related. Like, that's the only thing I know for sure. But beyond that, I can't recall. And so that audio was terrible.
Yeah,
not because of
bad.
Me or Bell in terms of like, the conversation was great, but like just the quality. We didn't have a microphone. We didn't have anything. And I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how, like, I didn't have any kind of skill set whatsoever in that department. Didn't understand how an RSS feed was. Didn't even know what an RSS feed was. And so, yeah, it just didn't do anything. So fast forward, start to see like how podcasting is doing this stuff and marketing, all that kind of good stuff. And so early on, I'm like, okay, I need to figure out the technicality of all of this if I'm going to enter into this from a professional standpoint. And so there was a couple of shows that what my company called Podastery launched with, which, for all varying topics, none of them were exactly the same. But one that I knew I wanted to do was I wanted to do one about comic book movies, and I wanted to do it with Bell. Because this has been a core factor of our friendship and our relationship over the years, is we've always geeked out about comic book characters and movies and kind of the lore that exists within all of our favorite geekdom properties and all that kind of good stuff. And plus, Bell is one of like the kindest, nicest, most easygoing people that you will ever meet. Like, Bell is literally like, he's ride or die without that energy. You know what I mean? Like, he's just like, he's just down, and it's like, yeah, cool, man, let's go. Like, you know what I mean? Like awesome. Like, awesome individual, awesome dude. Just somebody I've been just so rewarded to be able to spend the last decade of my life in this space with. And so I'm very, very grateful to you, buddy. I don't know if I've really ever expressed this in this capacity.
Thanks,
so this
man.
is good.
There's a lot of allergens in the room right now.
Yeah, no, it's all right, man. I think I'm feeling it here in Houston.
No, thank you. Yeah, well, and this was the gilded age of comic book movies, right? Like, all like we had like Iron Man coming out, and like all these different films and stuff were like on the horizon, and it was like, yeah, absolutely. Like, I would love to talk about these things because this is super cool. It's something that I'm into, and I love talking comics with you because you're so easy to talk to, and the conversation just flows, and it's like we have the same mindset, I think. I don't even think we talked about it, but we just kind of came to an agreement where it was like, every podcast or like news review show about different things was like, we are going to just poop on everything that is not absolutely 100% perfect. We're going to poop on it. We're going to dogpile it. And I that wasn't me. I didn't like that. I wasn't into it. Like, it feels like YouTube clickbait now, where it's like all the thousands of channels out there are just this thing sucks and blah blah blah, and it's like, it's garbage. It's all garbage. And so, like, I wanted to, even if a movie was bad, I wanted to take it from a spin. Like, we had our rose-colored retrospectives and stuff like that. And this is where this kind of spun out from, because both of us were in that mindset where it's like, you know what, we don't want to focus on the bad stuff. We want to talk about what's good, because everything else out there already focuses on the bad stuff. And so that's an avenue for us to kind of like, distinguish ourselves and make it more pleasant to listen to. And so from the get-go, that was kind of both of our mindsets, and I think that's why we work so well together is because of that. And like, yeah, I was like, absolutely, I would love to talk comic book movies with you, and this would be wonderful.
You mentioned it, Bell. Like, back then, the amount of news that was coming out about comic book movies was just, the gas was on. Like, it was just, there was tons and tons of stuff to talk about. Now, admittedly, there were a lot of people already doing that, and so like entering into the comic book movie podcast space, as novel of an idea as that sounds, there was quite a few. So we created Panel to Screen and gave it the appropriate title or tagline, which was the most unnecessary show on the internet. And we had fun with it, man. Like, it was a lot of fun. We only had like a few hundred folks that actually listened, but I mean, like, we were happy to do that. And my mindset was to like, this gets our chemistry going, gets our flow going, because at some point we're going to find a good TV show that fits into this space, and we're going to get in, we're going to be early adopters, and we're going to like hit it hard. And I remember very specifically, a lot of this was coming from when Arrow, I think we saw, the success of shows like Smallville and with Starkville House of L and podcasts like that really were able to create an audience very quickly by connecting with those shows and connecting with kind of the shared interest of their audience there. And then after Arrow, Quiver was a big podcast at the time that was really able to kind of gather an audience early on. And I'll never forget, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. launched. And when Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. came out, the television show, that had like 9 different podcasts that all came out all at once as a blitz. It was like the first time that anything like that had happened. And I remember because right before that, when Arrow happened, there were essentially 2 or 3 podcasts that launched around that time, 2 of which got shut off because their downloads were so high. Like they weren't paying their hosting costs. And so they got the, we're sorry, the podcast you were trying to listen to has not been paying their bills. Like they got like literally, I remember downloading that and hearing that. And I'm like, oh yeah, no, this is going to work. But then Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. happened and it was very clear, like, okay, no, you can't just like pop in anymore. Everybody's paying attention. The barrier to entry is so much lower. And so if you're going to compete in the after show market, you've got to really like compete and do so aggressively. And so when the Flash was announced and it was like this tie-in show, it was like the perfect opportunity. At that point, there was one other podcast at the time, and this is just, it was not as professionally produced as it is now. I'll just say that. And we saw it as a really great opportunity to kind of come in and be something different from what that other podcast was kind of presenting. And not only that, but coming in with kind of our established chemistry, with a little bit of our base audience, and then launching about 6 or 7 months prior to the show coming out so we could build up the content so that once the pilot released, if the pilot popped off, which of course it did, we'd already have that benefit of all that SEO and all the content behind us to be able to initially get up there and boost up in the rankings really, really early on, which is exactly what happened. We also had the benefit of some of the folks that were working on the pilot at that time were listening to our podcasts. And so that was because at the time there were only 2 of them. And again, of the 2, we were the only professionally produced show. And so people really kind of got behind it from, behind the scenes, which was really, really helpful. Now today, the funny thing that ended up happening as part of that tenure of the after show podcast market was that like and like Sports Center and all of like the larger like more established companies that's where they started dabbling in the podcast space. And so now about midway through, I'd say around season 3, we were no longer competing with just podcasters. Now we were competing with actual networks that had actual budgets. They were paying people a lot of money that we were not getting paid to produce.
And none of them contacted us.
yeah, exactly. If only they had reached out. But so it was a very interesting, like if you look at the past 9 years, essentially, I guess 10 years, if you consider the buildup of what we've done and what we were able to do and experience through FlashTVTalk, we've really seen some significant changes in the podcast industry. For the most part, we've been able to weather them. Now, the problem that happens is when you've latched onto a show, you're kind of dependent upon that show having an audience to be able to talk to. And sadly, the television show, which again, I still hold up, those early seasons are some of the best television of all time, really dropped off hard in the latter seasons. And so when the show drops off, our audience numbers drops off, which means that, the resources we can put into the show drop off. And at that point, it just kind of became like, hey, look, it's me and Beall checking in on each other every single week. And as Beall said, like our desire is not to put out negativity on the internet. There's too much of that already. We want to put out positivity. And that is difficult when you're talking about a show that you don't have a lot of positive things to say. We had fun with it. I think we made it work for the most part, but it was difficult there at the end.
And there's so much in there that I can relate to, specifically like Beall was saying, the negativity and the clickbait of YouTube. I found a lot of that to be present now as I'm trying to create my YouTube channel. And even in the comments of a lot of my videos, whether it's like a racist comment or just people just being negative, has been kind of very surprising to me. But I'm kind of like you guys. I want to put out positivity. I want to put out things that I care about and I like. That's the things I want to talk about. I don't want to talk about the things I don't like. So I can definitely relate to that, and I've spoken to other guests on the show as well that have said that. So I like this community that I've kind of been a part of, where it's mostly people being positive. So I'm appreciative of both of you two being this just another gem in the infinity gauntlet of positivity.
Oh man.
So that's fantastic. And then also doing a podcast on a show that um, started out great and then kind of petered off. I was a part of that as well. So I know that feeling of, man, how am I going to make this interesting to talk about when I no longer like the material? So that all of those things I can relate to, and I can commiserate with you boys. But man, you guys have done a fantastic job of continuing your brand, and like you said, just the professionalism. Everything that you've put out has been high quality. So I want to commend you guys for doing that for so long. And I'm really looking forward to the future of Beau and Beall. Like I said, I don't know if you want to say anything at this time, but I'm no matter what happens, I want everyone who is listening or watching this show right now, this episode, to follow both of these gentlemen. They've got some great content coming down the pipeline. They're like I said, I don't want to specifically say anything, but
Well, I mean, I could share a couple things if you'd like.
okay.
Yeah, so I mean, I will say, so a couple, I guess 2 years ago, we were Flash TV Talk, and we kind of officially dropped the Flash from the name. We still did Flash TV Talk on the TV Talk podcast, but the goal was to open it up to make it more flexible, so we could talk about any show we wanted to. If a show was having a really awesome season, we could talk about it, and if it stopped having a really awesome season, we wouldn't feel so, we didn't have to like keep on going from that standpoint. So on the TV Talk, if you go to tvtalk.fm, you can subscribe to the podcast there. That's got our entire backlog of Flash TV Talk, but it also has Mandalorian TV Talk, Kenobi TV Talk, She-Hulk TV Talk, like basically whatever it has been in kind of the Star Wars, Marvel, Geek era over the last couple of years. You'll find a TV Talk for it. And they're mostly minis too. So one of the things that we kind of switched to as well is made these kind of minis. They're more raw reactions. So for example, on Andor TV Talk, you might not hear me refer to the guy by the actual name, but he might be like, the Imperial dude on the forums, or something like that. Like, whatever.
Right,
whatever
right. Yeah.
And so, so I think if you're interested in that kind of content, it's there. Beall always has an open seat on the podcast. We were just talking about how we need to do our Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, which is a fan-freaking-tastic
I saw
movie.
it this weekend and I was blown away. So
we need to get into it then sooner rather than later, because talk about primordial Vactor chilling out in the comic book shop, not knowing what the future holds. If I could go back in time and tell Vactor, like, Vactor, Rocket Raccoon is going to be a household name. Like, that would blow your mind.
Right. 100%. There was no way that I could predict that, but I'm very happy of what we've gotten so far in the MCU. And this week, as we record this, Across the Spider-Verse comes out, so I'm super excited about that. We've got the Flash movie that's coming out next month, or actually, as we record this 2 weeks from now. So there's a ton of great stuff that's coming down the pipeline. So I can't wait to hear all of your guys' reactions. In the meantime,
let me give one more plug if I can.
Yeah.
Is that all right? Okay, so I want to also let people know, if you go to tvtalk.fm, you'll see a link for our YouTube channel. On the YouTube channel, we've done some fun things over the pandemic when television was gone. And so for a TV Talk podcast, we didn't really have anything to talk about. One of the things that we did was we started a Minecraft SMP with a couple of different folks. And the first 2 seasons of that was called Flashcraft. We built Star Labs in Minecraft and that sort of thing. We just recently concluded Batcraft, where we did the Batcave and Wayne Manor and kind of some different locations from the Batman universe. We are actually just about to launch in the coming weeks Fancraft, where we're taking that concept and kind of in the same type of way, we're kind of broadening it out. So we're creating essentially a Minecraft city with different districts, a Marvel district, a Star Wars district, a Tolkien district. And in those, we'll be building some of the kind of famous places from all of those universes. So if you like Minecraft, if you're interested in seeing some of the kind of the cool builds there, head over to tvtalk.fm and subscribe to our YouTube channel. There'll be some great content along the way coming out in the very near future.
Fantastic. Well, like I said, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. I love the positivity. I love what you guys stand for, and I love the quality of your work. So I continue to stand by that. Both of these guys are fantastic individuals, and you should follow them in the comments down below. Let us know what's going on in your world. I have a request from a listener, real quick. Bell, where is your Jay Garrick helmet? That was a question that was sent to me.
That's a good question.
That's Beau's helmet. Where is it, Beau? I don't see it. Well, I mean, it was always there. Oh no.
So wait.
Oh, no.
So okay. All right. This is
no.
bad. So we were gifted these awesome Jay Garrick helmets, and they sent them to my studio back when I was in Mississippi, and well, so like Bell's broke, and so
he never gave it. I never received it. Because if I did, it would be on display with a lot of my other nerd stuff that you see over there.
Okay, Bell, I'm sorry. I could have. I broke it. I broke your helmet. And I could have given you mine, and I didn't give you mine because I liked mine so much. And so I have had 2 Jay Garrick helmets in my possession. My kids play with them still.
Yeah. That's what happened to it. Beau broke it. So I never even got to see it because he destroyed it.
We did it as a. I remember when we launched the Patreon, we had 2 kind of benefits. One was like we got to a certain level, and one was the Ring That Grod, where Bell would go around Austin, Texas, dressed in a gorilla costume, which he did.
Yep.
And one was the real Beau Garrick, where I would go to work dressed as Jay Garrick for a day, and that's exactly what I did. And I live tweeted it. I'm sure it's probably still out there, even though I'm not on Twitter anymore. But I am on Instagram, so feel free to follow me.
Oh man, that answer was better than I could have thought. And actually, I'm sorry, I was looking at the question that came in. This is a live question that came in because someone that we all know is listening, and he knows that I'm doing this interview. He did say Beau. I'm sorry. He asked Beau where was the Jay Garrick helmet. So that was a great answer. I'm glad it was asked.
So I didn't even have to confess to all that? I could have just said my kids play with it still?
I'm glad that this has come to light. This is a fantastic story. I'm very happy and very pleased. So you can follow Ring That Bell on Twitter. You can follow The Real Beau York on Instagram. Like I said, everything is going to be down
Incognito
below.
Beau. I'm sorry. I'm not The Real Beau York. I'm Incognito Beau. Don't tell anybody.
This is amazing, boys. I'm glad you were able to join me here in the Vactor-Verse. Thank you very much. Beau loves comics. Bell loves comics, and you should too.
Wow, the Vactor-Verse! Oh my gosh! I'm sorry. Sorry. I thought I'd go like I thought I'd overshoot it early, so then we can bring it back.
Yeah, I gotta reel it in a little bit, just a little bit.